Hi everyone, my name is Ramin. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Finleap, and I'm really happy to lead this panel. The topic today is pay by car, pay by fridge, how Internet of Things is changing by payments. And I'm very happy to having on stage Markus, Markus Braun, who is the CEO of Wirecard. Wirecard is one of the leading technology and banking players in Europe and even worldwide. Then I'm also really happy to having Khalid, Fellahi on the stage, who is heading all the digital businesses from Western Union. Western Union is one of the largest remittances players worldwide. And I'm also really happy, last but not least, to have Matthias Mandelkow on stage, who's managing director of Sunhill. They're big in payments, mobile payment solutions, mobile solutions when it comes to parking and so on. So all really great experts to having on this discussion. So welcome, you three. And what it actually means, pay by car, pay by fridge. Khalid, do we have to be afraid that our fridge is ordering 50 kilos of lobsters and you have to pay for it?
I think we were having a chat and we agreed that if it's like 50 bottles of beer, it's fine. Lobster would be an issue. I think that sitting at this table, I would argue that what I represent, both as a consumer and also as a business, I think I'm a thing, right? What that means is basically we are on the other end of the service. We're actually the service that actually provides some service or value to the customer, and we want payments to be very seamless. So I think that Internet of Things is payments in Internet of Things is already pretty widespread. It's just the next generation that we're talking about. I mean, everybody here has, I'm guessing, automated systems for their parkings or for tolls or for their mortgages for that matter, and these are all things. The angles that we're looking at these days is, as things get more and more intelligent, is how we interact with an ecosystem that is becoming more and more embedded with artificial intelligence. So for example, we're looking at what kind of interactions for our services we can have with things such as Alexa, in the ecosystem from Amazon, or with Siri, or with this kind of thing. So that's really the next generation for us, and where we can embed our services. But at the end of the day, I think that anything that provides a service needs to be paid. The payment experience has to be extremely simple, and it's really the easy thing to do.
Markus, thanks, Khalid. Markus, your company is one really large issuer in Europe when it comes to credit cards. So in Berlin-Mitte, a central hotspot for a digital economy, it's really hard to pay by credit card because people still prefer cash, and the Germans are really not using the card so often as they should be. Why do you think, or what are the use cases for IoT which you will see in the next 1 to 3 years? What do you think is the most obvious one?
Yeah, I think we have to differentiate a little bit what's in there for producers and what's in there for the consumer. And I think for both sides there is a lot to gain. To start with the consumer, where do we see, in concrete terms today, Internet of Things trends? I think we definitely see it all at TV sets, we see it at music. So I think in the next future, probably a lot of TV sets and hi-fi systems will converge towards streaming systems. What's in there for the consumer, probably the business model more and more moves towards pay-per-use. So, and for an individualization. So this old approach to push a content into a TV system, and the consumer either takes the full program or he doesn't take the program, I think this will be substituted by a much more individualized approach. And this we'll see in a lot of areas. So I think for the consumer, it's individualization, and it's also completely new pricing systems. I think what already happened, for example, in airline travel, that you find individual pricing depending on when you pay for a flight, whether the airline has already good coverage for the flight or bad coverage. I think this will come to a lot of products. But not only the merchant side will be included in this more individualized pricing, I think that also the consumer side will be included. And I think this is also a second paradigm that is in there for the consumer. I think a third element is definitely convenience. So when we come to payments, I would differentiate also in the physical world into 3 areas. There are payments like, for example, at parking systems, which you do probably every day or very often every day, or let's say in countries where we have toll collect, where you have to do payments every day when you go by car, or let's say when you pay for underground. I think there it could definitely be a further convenience step if it runs totally automized. So if you don't even have to tap somewhere to pay, but really in the back end of a wallet, etc., the wallet recognizes either because it is fully integrated in the car or it is integrated in your smartphone, recognizes that, for example, you pass an underground barrier and that you go somewhere and directly pays for the bill. I think a good example is also in the car and driving area, new business models that run around car sharing, new business models like Uber, where also, let's say, the whole paradigm of how cars are used is probably transformed in a way that this old paradigm, you pay for a car and then you have it for 4 to 5 years, is also transformed into a more temporary usage of cars. And there, of course, you also need more individualized, flexible payments, dynamic payments that are, of course, built around internet and mobile technology. So I think there's a lot in there for the consumer. For the producer of hardware, of cars, of watches, etc., of course, I think this new technology is cheaper. It brings a lot of additional information that he can use to personalize his offer to the consumer. And I think, to some extent, we can bring the coolness of internet to the physical world, to say it a little bit on a soft basis.
Okay, so I really enjoyed how you divided by consumer and merchant. Let's stay on the consumer side for the beginning. Matthias, consumers, everything is automated in the back. The wallet is just paying. Aren't people afraid of losing control of the payments happening in the end? Everybody knows the argument, oh, I prefer cash, so I know what I spend. How will it change in the...
Yeah, well, I think the things are happening already. So, of course, if you, for the example of parking payment, normally you don't like walking to the parking meter and paying for the ticket. So if you can make it automatically, it's easier, it's convenient, and the people love it. And I think this is an example where you don't have to be afraid of losing control, even if you have a list of all transactions at the end of the month or in real time on your mobile phone. So I think this fear is not so real upcoming. But what I can understand, so we experienced it for an example, there are services, you're paying parking upfront for like 1 hour or 2 and it's expiring and then you can prolong. Or there are services making start-stop, and if you have a start-stop solution and you forget to stop, then the ticket runs on and you don't feel good if you realize it at the end of the day. So this is some fear of losing control, but there are algorithms coming up and they will solve this situation. So I think it's... Yes, it is. There is a fear. We are changing behaviors. We are changing experiences. But at the end, the people will join it. And what we can say is they love it. So.
To what degree the merchant needs to be responsible to educate the customer on spending behaviors or paying behaviors? I mean, in German, the Verbraucherschutz, everybody knows. So all the regulation regarding how do you handle the customer. In banking, do a parking provider now then has to agree to the same terms and has to really being responsible educating those customers?
Yeah, it's a funny question because it's really happening that people are coming to the edge cases, you know. So the normal behavior is, yes, I see there's a service, I use it in a normal way and everything is fine. but we come to a point that people are using our service where our service is not working, and then they are claiming us for having the service used and paying a service fee for not using our service in the right zone. So there are some edge cases what we cannot handle, because it's always an analogy to the non-digital world, the real world, and like it was before. And yes, so we are facing edge cases. The parking operators or the merchants themselves have to educate the people a little bit, but it's also progress of migrating the people in the behavior.
So I think just as I was listening, obviously there are a couple of things that have been said here that are interesting. So when we look at the consumer, the consumers just want things, right? And actually it should be as simple as wanting and then asking for something, and then it should be, the payment should be frictionless. It should be, you know, almost like something that you don't have to do anything about, right? That's the beauty of downloading something from iTunes and just putting your finger on your phone. There is, when we look at this, there are like different layers of innovation where companies can bring different values. If you think about it, there are service providers like us, for example, where we provide a very simple service where we transfer money across the world. And basically the instruction should be as simple as send money to my, send $500 to my daughter. And actually I expect my system, and I said Alexa is an example, to know who my daughter is and how to do that, because I've already configured a system. It should be as simple as a sentence. Then the other aggregators is that then I expect by my payments partners, people that actually help me fund that transaction, to have created protocols and ecosystems that are simple for the consumer, simple for companies like us to integrate to. And to integrate to in a world where we're going to be using more and more things that simplify our lives, even for a service like ours. And then you have innovation opportunities as you're creating these simple payment systems that Markus was talking about. You know, as consumers may be paying pay by the drink, right? Paying more and more things that you're going to be using. You have aggregators that can provide this information to you. The Mint of Internet of Things, if people are familiar with Mint, aggregating my spend and informing me how my spend is, giving me some level of control of how my spend is. So if we look at the innovators, I hope that in this room we have a ton of them, I'm sure, at least in this palace today. There are so many places where there's no one company is going to do it. It's ecosystems that will be kind of layered on top of each other to provide these seamless experience in payments, in the service. Everybody can focus on their value add, and in aggregating, for example, payment information or authorization systems, etc. So that's really the I think the thinking that we have to continue with the extension of pay by the drink services around us, and how you know, all of the ecosystem has to come together.
The ecosystem argument is really interesting. So if we agree on, okay, the customers, they will get to know how all the things works. Don't be afraid of using those solutions. But you mentioned Alexa as one example, which is a solution from Google. We had it before. Google
Amazon.
or Android Car. Huh?
Yeah, Amazon.
Amazon, okay. But I think Google,
Anybody
what's the name
Amazon?
of Google is similar to it. So Google is providing IT, Google is providing car Android, I think, or Android car. Google is in payment, Google has already large transaction play. So is it really that the ecosystems needs hundreds, thousands of different merchants, or will it in the end just stuck to Google, Alibaba, Amazon, and Apple? What's your view on it, Markus?
I answer this question, and then I want to give a short answer also to this fear and danger thing, because I think it's a very important issue in transformation processes. No, I don't think that that we find here a situation where we find total convergence towards single merchants. So I think in a B2C situation, where you have on the one side a consumer and on the other side a merchant, the maximum that you see is that it tends towards oligopolistic situation. It never becomes a monopolistic situation. The consumer always wants choice. And even in the big operating systems, we see today competition. If we think of the 80s, 90s, everybody thought that Microsoft operating system will be a dominating force. Is anybody talking today when we think about mobile, about Windows Mobile? Not so much. The talk is about Android, Yes, it is Google, but it's a very open system. And the strength of Android is not so much that it is coming from Google. The strength of Android is that it's a very open system. So already this openness is a core element there. Also, we see clear trends that iOS is opening up. There are new operating systems coming to the table. So no, I don't think that there will be a monopolistic situation. I think there is good competition out there. I think there are companies that are driving more innovations, and therefore they get a higher share of consumers that are early adopters. But I think that at the end of the day, there always will be a good free market situation. And I don't think that we need here interference by regulators, etc. I think we have a competition of good ideas. That's a good thing, and we have to compete over ideas and not so much over regulation and law.
Let me stop. Sorry, just to stop in the those oligopole situation you just described. I just read Google, for example, doesn't want to show advertising for payday loans because they say payday loans are bad for the customers and we don't want to accelerate that. So they actually don't show advertising for payday loans anymore. This is a situation where Google, with its power, really hits the payday loan sector. Isn't it something which then can also happen to other producers who needs to use those oligopole networks?
Yeah. I think we have this discussion in a lot of disruptive technologies today. We have it with Uber, we have it with Netflix. Now this is a discussion with Google. I think the consumer decides if a provider, even when he's a very large dominating provider, doesn't take into account consumer interest, then he goes down. Take Nokia. Nokia had a dominating situation in the cell phone market, but they didn't see this need for touch screens. They didn't see this next evolutionary step, which, by the way, was exactly a step that operating systems over cell phones moved towards open operating systems. This was exactly the step that we are now discussing in the physical world. So basically, a smartphone is nothing else today than a small PC. Nokia before had a proprietary operating system. So I think, but of course, I'm coming from technology. So I think the market always decides, the consumer decides. And yes, temporarily, some players can, of course, use a dominating position. But at the end of the day, you cannot work against the consumer and his interests. It's a very democratic playing field out there. That's my clear conviction. Can I say something to this danger and fear thing? Because sure. It's always something that comes when we're discussing with internet. And this is exactly my point. I think we can look at internet as a whole. Of course, internet also brings new risk profiles. There's new dangers, that data are stolen, we have cyber criminality, etc. Why does it still work, and why, at the end of the day, the balance works also for the consumer? It brings, on the positive side, so much new convenience. And that's a very good example. Of course, we have to address, also when we're now discussing Internet of Things, all these new paradigms we have to address with new professional risk management. Very much the same risk management that we learned for online. This is why a company like us is very appropriate also to address payments for Internet of Things, because we can reuse fully what we learned in terms of risk management for online payments. It's very much the same paradigm now in mobile phones, etc. And it will work if, let's say, the balance between risk and convenience works for the convenience side. If the value add for the consumer is so strong that he adopts. I think that's always what moves new developments.
Okay. Matthias, do you think that you can transform parts of the risk management task to the consumers by let him control more if you push notification him with all his transaction, for example, or he is more in control because he can directly interact with the systems regarding spending limits and so on?
So, well, I don't think it's a nice move to transfer risks to the customer. I would say it's better
Risk management, sorry.
Risk management, yeah. So if we so our philosophy here is that we try to have a very good information policy and inform the customer in every situation, every single step, so he has a good control about every step he's doing. And even if something is going wrong, we try to inform him in the direct way. So I think it's a matter of a good communication line, and all the new medias and all the systems are trying to solve those situations. So I think it's a good way to do it like this.
Matthias, can you give us a little bit more insights on what you see as a use case? So we already had the parking use case, which is a use case you're currently working on.
Yes, so when we were starting with our service, it was just an on-street parking service, very easy, very simple. And then the iPhone and the smartphone appears, and then we developed in the direction of being a mobility service provider. So we are addressing all kinds of tickets around the traffic chain. And since we were acquired last year by Volkswagen, now we have a new aim, which means making the car more smart, making the situation of let the things like parking, which is one of the main pain points for the modern driver, to solve it in a very easy and convenient way. And for example, what we heard from Markus, like this integrating in the cars with the mirror link, for example, it's already possible that you just mirror the app and that you can park through the HMI, the human machine interface, so your onboard unit is able to make the payment for you. And this is the direction we are heading now, and I think this is something what is upcoming, and yeah.
I think these initiatives in cars, where you have on the one side the proprietary car operating system, and on the other side new paradigms like Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, this could be the next bridge, so to say, where you combine proprietary systems with open systems, where you have some control still from the producer side, and on the other side you can mirror apps into a car, and you can also, for example, use payment technology that comes from the smartphone.
Khalid, what are use cases you see within your working field you're currently working on?
So, as I said, we are a very specialized service. We do one thing, we do it well, and basically we concentrate on this task. So what I was describing before is actually a little bit our next thinking, where and I was, talking about Alexa because it sits in my living room and it listens to everything I say, and it seems to be learning, it acquires skills, and I can instruct it to do things. And my wife asks me to do things, and I tell her, ask Alexa. So it's actually making my life simpler.
Who is more demanding, your wife or Alexa?
No, actually, Alexa is nice.
Okay.
Sorry. So I think that the way I look at this is really how can we use the things around us to make our lives simpler, right? And that's the way we look at it. So in our service, we just try to say, okay, what is especially with the millennials, what is their expectation? To do something extremely simple. When I think money transfer, I think about the sequence of things that need to happen. I need to manage risk, I need to manage this, etc. And kind of, in a certain way, we replicate that in the experience, right? We take people through a very, sequential transaction. Works well. We built an ecosystem to do that. But at the end of the day, I know that the expectation, even from me, would be simply to say, do something very simple. So that's the use case that I see. Now, as a company, even though we're a large company, we can't innovate on everything. So my vision is that when we have things like that, we expect innovators, startups, people that are in ecosystem to come up with some better ideas, some ideas to make it more simple. This is why I like actually in this kind of forums, is you pose a problem, you're part of a value chain, and then you kind of contribute to how this is going better. I think Markus was saying earlier, the success of platforms is today and how open they are. You may be extremely good at one thing, but you can't be good at everything. So you have to make your system open, and that's what actually basically these guys have been doing, the Googles and others, so that other innovators can come and build on top of that. The information is interesting because we live in a world today where I have a dashboard for everything. My utility company provides me with a dashboard of how much CO2 I'm consuming, how much I'm consuming in the day, etc. And it actually gives me tips today. So I almost like expect today, as part of a service, and this is differentiation, that whoever is going to provide me with the best decision tools, and they should not be complicated, just simplify it for me, is probably my first choice. As we have more and more dashboards about our spend, about our consumption of energy, about how much CO2 I'm generating, and maybe people are becoming more and more conscious about that. There are immense opportunities for people to come up with systems that can aggregate all of that and provide you with that kind of information. And then they're a value add for people like us, because I'm not going to invent that as a company. I expect somebody to actually come and say, hey, we could do this for you and you'll have a better service than others. So that's the kind of things that I expect.
So the rebundling of those services or aggregation of the service really goes along with the convenience Markus just described. Who will be the merchants, again, who are providing this convenience? Will it be like in China, where you have like WeChat for the gate for everything mostly, or do you still think there will be complete new players in it? Will it be the big American players? What's your guess?
Guys, I mean, the last 15 years, we have, the largest company in the world has been created, 17 years ago? Right? So what's going to happen in 10 years? I have no idea. I mean, I don't know anybody has an idea. Hopefully it will be in this palace somewhere that some of these players are. But I think it's just the people who basically address a problem better than everybody else. And with open systems now, you can build on top of every other system. Startups now don't have payments problems. Before you used to build everything yourself. Right? Now I can go to Wirecard and maybe have access to alternative payment systems that I don't need to build anymore. Startups can do it too. Right? They can connect to Simple, they can connect to any other ecosystem. So I think as we go, hopefully, we will see more and more newcomers with better ideas, or the incumbents reinventing themselves or acquiring these new guys. Right? That's basically what happens more often than not.
I think I fully agree. I think this is exactly the point. We all don't know. But I think we can say the winners will be that really see this convergence between online, mobile, and point of sale. Because that's what internet technology can achieve in the next 4 to 5 years. This is why Google is experimenting with cars. This is why online payment systems that are only dedicated for online, like PayPal, for example, are trying now to move to the point of sale. And this is why a lot of big producers of physical goods are trying to integrate internet technology, etc. So I think the big thing is this convergence. And of course, in all times when we see big, innovative paradigm shifts, which will be not only in payment in the next 3 to 5 years, but in a lot of areas, of course, the companies will, let's say, win that aggressively adapt to that, open up to that, like Western Union is doing, for example, and not sticks to, let's say, its old strategies. But we see it in a lot of areas. So this is why, coming back to your point, I don't think that only the online guys have good chances, but there are also some very big physical goods companies that are really currently adopting and going for these paradigms.
Very interesting. Who do you see concrete? So BMW shall start BMW payment, or BMW?
Not so much in the payment area, but in the Internet of Things area, definitely. So the big car producers, for example, Volkswagen, they bought Sunhill technology, or they invested in Sunhill technology. And I think they already have very concrete plans. I'm not sure whether it's Android Auto or Apple CarPlay to integrate it in their systems. So I think exactly this partnering and thinking from the consumer side, really trying to provide in the best setup of front-end and back-end solutions, the best convenience for the consumer, so that in a seamless way he can use payments, but also a lot of other services. It's not only payments. Yeah. I think that's the right approach. It's true for fintech, and it's true for automotive, it's true for parking systems, it's true for watches, it's true for fridges, to come back to your initial point. So I think in a lot of areas, this collaboration between innovative internet technology-driven companies and brick-and-mortar companies, I think that's the success factor.
Will be really interesting to see brick-and-mortar companies actually to move into technology, or more and more to technology and to the internet space. Yeah, maybe you should have a look out what a Swatch is doing, what a Rolex is doing. Maybe they're not large enough, but at least we have car companies. Other than car companies, watchers, do you see any other industry which comes to your mind directly?
TV, music streaming, I think that this will be big things. I think if we're discussing a home situation in 5 years, I don't think that you have a proprietary TV set anymore, but it will be some kind of large tablet where you fully integrated, have your music system integrated, you have probably your video gaming system integrated if you have children or if you stayed a child yourself. So I think that's definitely the way forward, to stay in the home situation.
When I look at the home situation, so my TV is from Samsung, otherwise are probably from LG. When we look on the DACH area, do we have to be afraid that, I mean, cars, now the Tesla guys coming, they're coming way more from technology, so does DACH has a chance to play a role there in the future? I don't see so many actors right now being there in the forehand.
So I don't know about that, but one thing which, and I'm not very expert at the automotive or other things, but when you talked about Tesla or others, I think that what we've seen and throughout history, but probably it's almost like accelerating, when you have incumbents that have a position, they don't have a very, very strong incentive to innovate and make things better. When you have disruptors that come with a completely different value proposition, you suddenly see the good incumbents kind of catch up very quickly. Like 3 or 4 years ago, who would talk about self-driving cars? Nobody, right, except Google, right? Now everybody has a self-driving car. Project. I mean, I can already ask Tesla to just to drive for me on the highway. So I think that when we look at the companies like BMW or others, and I've seen their latest i8, I think, car. I just dream about it now. Obviously, these guys, I mean, the incumbents have some extremely strong assets that they can put on the table. It's just that catching up or even leapfrogging the new technologies or the new disruptors is going to be. It's a matter of life or death, right? So that's going to happen. It's accelerating today. Who would have thought about these companies proposing so many things new today, or even the electric cars, right? If Tesla was not around, how many value propositions would we have today out there? So that's more my take about the incumbents here.
By change, the incumbents have to pick up.
Maybe to add some more words from the Volkswagen side. So as you know, there was some big impact last year happening, and this was also leading to a dramatic change of mindset and
too much software.
Yes, good and bad software, And this is a bad example, but even from this, let's say, bad point in time, you can lead out, and I think it's totally like we heard about, like Nokia. So the original OEMs in Europe are now facing the same situation. So, and if they are not preparing for this disruptive technology coming from the US, I think it will happen the same. So and I think they are smart enough right now to see that digitalization is one of the most important steps in the next 10 years. And yes, I hope that we can distribute a little bit to that and being part of that story. And yeah, let's see how it will develop. But I think working in the field of electromobility and digitalize the car and make it part of the Internet of Things is very smart and the only sensible way of surviving this.
So it's about catch up, it's about speed, catching those ups, that those OEMs still play a significant role as they played in the last years. So when do we see the first self-driving car on German Autobahn?
Yeah, okay, this is a fantastic question. So I think it's already possible. So if you see all this driving assistance and all the different parts, so like steering and keeping the distance and keep the car on the track and stuff, I think it's already possible. And what I know from different car manufacturers, they can do it already, but you know, there are a lot of other questions around in this story, like in the impact situation, who decides what is the hitting point. So, for example, like there's an old grandma and a young kid, and the car has to decide where is the impact happening and stuff like this. So there are some strict things and some accidents which you cannot plan, and this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of this topic.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly the point. If we think about self-driving cars, or if I take this paradigm and transform it into payments, it's a self-service payment, for example, in an in-store situation. We can already do that. We can combine RFID, host card emulation technology, Bluetooth Low Energy. I'm coming from technology, so I'm using these acronyms. To put it simple, these are all technologies where in combination we can, in real time, identify a product in a supermarket, for example, and theoretically it could be, without interference of a physical cash desk, be paid with your smartphone. The challenge very often is, and this is why also self-driving cars will take some time, is the legal framework. If technology doesn't work, what are the wraps and warranties? So this is why normally we're not discussing a revolution where something is coming tomorrow, but an evolutionary process. And this is why also the self-driving car will take some time. It's not only a technology challenge, but it's also a challenge for the whole legal framework. But when the technologies are there and the consumer really sees a need, if these two things are true, things come. Mm-hmm. I would put it that simple. And then the legal framework is just a question of time.
I totally agree. So technology, legal framework, and then still, it couldn't be it happening that the speed is still too fast, too quick for the consumer? Isn't the adoption rate maybe too high? I mean, on the latest Facebook conferences, they already said, okay, our technology maybe can do already more when it comes to artificial intelligence and so on. What they actually today open up to every customer because they're afraid of that the speed of adoption is frightening the customer again. Do you think that will be a problem, or?
Let me first say, I think the technology development must always be, and we can now have a discussion whether it's 2 or 5 years before what you see on the street. I think with cars it's about 5 to 7 years or sometimes longer. So the products that today everybody has in his pocket are of course based on the technology that from a technology perspective is already old school, because it has to fulfill a lot of criteria, including a clear legal framework, and this takes some time. So I think it's a good thing that the industry, we are in payment already focusing exactly on products that will be relevant in 5 years. I think this is exactly how you have to think. If you're just thinking of what is possible today, you will lose out. I think you always have to see the next curve, and you have to have a clear vision where the market goes. This is why, for good reason, Google is investing in self-driving cars today, even though probably they will earlier start being relevant in 5 years.
Thanks to the panel. The last 5 minutes I want to use for a Q&A session. So if there are any questions, I think there's one right here already and 2 in the back. Do we have another microphone for the Q&A sessions, please?
Hi, Garrett Zinderman of Millipay. I was wondering, like, if you could summarize the technical requirements that a payment in an all-connected future would need to fulfill, and like which of the current, I would say, like schemes, for example, would already be best prepared for that, and also like what you see maybe as evolution of business models. So I mean, nowadays you have maybe like a freemium model in the online world, and some like e-commerce, transactional business. How do you see maybe like in the connected world these kind of business models evolve? Thanks.
I can start, but I think there is already a pre-configuration of these business models. If I look at payments, I mean, the concept of wallet has been, kind of being more and more, popularized and obvious. And basically, it's just an aggregation, and to make it very simple for either developers or users to eliminate the friction. So you have multiple wallets that are available, whether it's a PayPal or whether it's a Apple Pay or whether it's anything that is out there. As a service provider, for example, when it comes to me, I relish simplification on a function that is not in my core business. I just want to have payments, right? I then manage what is my part, which is the risk, or which is money transfer, etc. So the ecosystems are already being built on that, on that aspect. The other example that I was giving earlier, which I believe is more like an innovation opportunity for a lot of people, is this thing which we are looking at and saying like, oh my God, there are so many things that are happening. How can we help the consumers, be more informed and easily informed, and something that is simple. Aggregating payments already existing, aggregating information is still out there, I think could be something that is important. So the business models, I think it would not be particularly, different, meaning that for payments at least, you'd have provide payments that generate a value for the payment company. And typically, merchant pays is still the main model that is out there, and or the consumer sometimes can actually pay for the service. I don't see like a major difference. Whenever we've seen freemiums, it's because there was an ultimate motive. I mean, P2P transfers, for example, is a very simple one, or Facebook, it's a very simple one. It's all free, but I'm actually going to make somebody else pay for you through advertising or other model. Still, I don't think it would be fundamental changes in business models.
I'm sorry, maybe just on that point. So when you speak about the wallets, do you then, for example, see like an increase in number of wallets so that every device basically has like a micro wallet, or there will be like some consolidation also in the wallets where some standards will evolve so that each like consuming device would basically be able to charge, or these kind of questions?
The answer to your question would request an own panel session. But let me try to give you a short answer, and let me give it to you on the technology basis and on the usage case basis. From a technology basis, I would definitely say that upcoming technologies like NFC, also especially in its version of host card emulation technology, will provide the ability to run over smartphones convergent payment products. What do I mean by that? Payment products that work offline and online. I think that's the next stage, that you have very secure offline-online payment methods where you have over your smartphone an integrated view. You see in real time all transactions, and you can fully use these convenience factors that we discussed, that you have a very easy tap and go at small ticket size transactions, at larger transactions. You have a better security than in a plastic card, because you see in real time the transactions. You have, for example, a fingerprint security combined with tokenization. So this is where which I would strongly believe in. From you discussed, or your question was also the business model. I personally think that it makes very much sense also for us to collaborate, for example, with the big card schemes. This is what we do. We don't think so much that the consumer needs a new, let me say, a new bank account. So I think you can always optimize the way how a bank account is addressed, but it's a good approach to reuse all the bank accounts that are out there. And this you achieve by, for example, collaborating with the brick card schemes, Visa, MasterCard, because then the merchant can directly accept all these payment solutions as at his standard point of sale, at his standard merchant acceptance point. So I would see, again, a collaboration where you reuse the maximum of existing bank accounts and you basically transform the real-time way how you address such a bank account, for example, over a convergent product that really works online and offline in a very convenient way. I definitely think that this will be a wallet where, again, the back end, theoretically different payment cards could be integrated. So you still will have perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 cards, depending on different usages, and I think that's the way forward.
Again, thanks the whole panel. 5 minutes left. Oh, so we can have more questions. Okay.
Christoph Schlemmer, APA. I have a short question for Khalid. How Western Union is reacting to new digital competitors like TransferWise. What is Western Union doing in this direction?
Yeah, it's far from Internet of Things, but well, listen, it's very simple. Everything that I was saying before stands for what we do. As an incumbent in in this business, you basically have to always watch out there for what can appear as innovation, what can appear as something new, and just basically make sure that you are building the next generation of services that will compete effectively. I'd make one comment about that. Large organizations like us, it's always very difficult to innovate in a very structured corporation, right? That's looking at every quarter, is on the stock exchange, has very specific processes, etc. So it's very difficult to actually truly innovate unless you set up an ecosystem within even your own company to do that. So just to give you a story, a few years ago, about 5 years ago, Western Union was looking at the digital money transfers and all the competition that we have out there. And we just thought that it was impossible for us to do a good job unless we operated in the same way that a startup would be actually operating. And what we did is we created a separate division that we put in San Francisco that I had the pleasure of creating. And we basically started operating pretty much like a startup in terms of innovation, no bureaucracy, dedication of resources, and basically have the same agility as a competitor. So you talked about some competitors. I can tell you one thing is today we are 5 years later, the leader in that particular space, even in the digital world, while 5 years ago we basically had barely a business. So we learn from competition, and what we learn is behave like one if you want to beat, if you want to keep your, your place in this area. Have I answered your question?
Yesterday at this very place was a panel about blockchain technology, and I think these two topics, Internet of Things and blockchain, would be a perfect fit for each other. To answer the questions and challenges of how can possibly trillions of devices can pay each other and other things. So my question would be, I'm sure all of the panelists have heard about this topic. What's your stance on this? Are there any plans to implement this? Because possibly all payment processes in the Internet of Things era could be made obsolete, possibly by blockchain technology. So would be interested in your stance on this.
Let me answer it twofold. First of all, I think that we are very often too quickly thinking that a new paradigm disrupts everything. Basically, we still have TV programs, and we still have books, and we still have cars, etc. So I think that I wouldn't put it that high. I definitely think that blockchain is a very interesting technology. I think it's really in its earliest stage. I do not see one paradigm that is out there that I would consider really scalable. So I would very much differentiate between what usage cases today blockchains have in real world and its potential as a mathematical approach. It basically is a perfect decentralized way to, at 100%, identify an item, to put it very simple. And this is a very interesting paradigm. I could definitely see it in wire transfer. I could see it in authentication technology. So they are definitely very interesting things that where blockchains could bring a value add, but there is not one example out there that I would give too much of a chance to really do that. So I really see it very early stage, and I think this is something that perhaps in the next 3 to 5 years we'll find a first paradigm how it really works. This is how I would see it.
So, time is over. Thank you really much to all the panel, and I think this is what big applause.
Thank you.